Continuing, Avery pretrial, July 2006, motion hearing. Next witness, Investigator Mark Wiegert, called as witness herein, having been first duly sworn, was examined and testified as follows. The clerk, please be seated. Please state your name. The court, all right. Mr. Fallon, Attorney Fallon, just so we're clear, as I understand the suppression motion, counsel, you are challenging primarily and exclusively the searches of your client's trailer and garage based on the initial avertments of the affidavit prepared by this witness. Is that correct? Attorney Buting, on the Frank's motion, no. It would be the question of whether any part of this warrant is sufficient for probable cause to anything that they search, including the property of the whole salvage yard. Attorney Fallon, if you are asserting that, then my point at this time is I would like a demonstration of standing by the defendant if he would prove that he is standing to object to the searches of locations on the salvage yard above and beyond his private trailer and his garage. If he's then challenging the entire fruits of everything, then he ought to show standing that he's entitled to challenge. Attorney Buting, again, Judge, I would have thought that if the state was going to object to standing, they would have replied. I filed this June 15, I think it was approximately a month ago. They haven't raised an issue on Frank's, whether there is a right to a hearing. They haven't raised an issue on standing. Mr. Avery lived and worked on that property, just like the others. I think beyond that, I don't have any witness to establish that today. Attorney Fallon, I would note for the record that standing is the first issue that needs to be dealt with when you are dealing with a comprehensive search warrant such as this. And if the defense is challenging everything, if everything is in play, then it seems to me, the fact that the defendant worked there, it doesn't cut the mustard in terms of establishing he has standards, for instance, to challenge the searches of burn barrels, of fire pits, the residence of Dolores and Stephen Avery, and the residences of Bob Jonda, the business office. He's an employee, as I understand it. He's not an owner. So my question is, that's why I asked the question, what is really being suppressed and where is the standing? I mean, that's Hornbook law. Attorney Buting, counsel is correct. He would not have standing to object to the searches of other private residences encompassed in this warrant. Maybe I should have been more clear on that, but the motion does go to the search of the properties, which would include the RAV4 vehicle that was found, as well as his personal residence, garage, and other areas within the general purview of those particular buildings. Attorney Fallon, again, my question then is, well, what's the defendant's reasonable expectation of privacy in a vehicle owned by Teresa Halbach? Just because it's found in the salvage yard, that makes a reasonable expectation of privacy? I think not. Attorney Buting, the issue is not what privacy he has in the vehicle. The issue is what privacy interest he has on the property. And if the state wishes to challenge that, we can take the testimony today on these issues, and I can try and supplement the record later to establish the standing questions. But they have not raised that until today as a concern. I think that my motion was pretty clear as to what was involved here. I mean, obviously, issues related to the business office, business records are not in play. There is nothing there anyway. I think counsel knows that. As to other private residences on the property, again, there is no issue there either, as counsel is aware of. So there's really only a few areas of this 40-acre property that are of issue here. Attorney Fallon, and that's the point of the pleading. The pleading does suggest suppression of derivative fruits, etc. But when you read the argument, the entire argument is obsessed with its numerous entries to both his trailer and to the garages, and not much else. So that's the reason for my question, what is at issue? And if it's the trailer and the garage and those entries, then, well, I will concede standing. I don't have a problem with that. But everything else is in play, then Mr. Avery should take the stand and demonstrate he has reasonable expectation of privacy sufficient to be acknowledged by a court of law in the remaining 39.5 acres. Attorney Buting, perhaps there's confusion here. What we anticipate that we're going to take testimony from the witnesses this afternoon on the Frank's portion of the motion. That's separate from the separate violation alleged, which is the exceeding the scope of the warrant. Before you can even get to that question, we have to determine if the warrant itself was valid under Frank's. We have to look at alleged untruthful or statements made with reckless disregard for the truth, see if we can meet our burden to establish the Frank standard. And then, if so, those paragraphs are stricken from the warrant. Then we look at the warrant to see if there's probable cause to support it at all. If there's no probable cause left, then the whole second part of the motion, which is the exceeding the scope of because they entered over and over and over and over. After that, all of the warrant then becomes moot. If the warrant is found to be invalid, lacking probable cause after we strike and redact those portions for which the Frank standard has been met, then the rest of it is mooted. The rest of all those entries would be illegal, I think. I think counsel would agree with that. Attorney Fallon, that assumes he has standing to challenge the warrant. He has standing to challenge the warrant as it may pertain to his residence and his garage, and probably his yard area. But for instance, the Toyota RAV4, which the evidence will show is about as far away from Mr. Avery's particular curtilage as you could possibly get on that property. So while I would concede that he has standing, and thus the ability to challenge the warrant on our Frank's theory for purposes of his trailer and his garage, I would concede that, and we're ready to go. But that's why I asked the question, what is in play? If it's all in play, then there should be a standing. Attorney Buting, Judge, if you think about it, it really doesn't matter at this point. We can establish the question later if we need to. But if the warrant is invalid as to Mr. Avery's residence and his garage, then that's obviously an important legal determination that's going to have to be made. It's a separate question whether then that means he also had standing, or somehow the rest of the property also would be evidence would be suppressed from other parts of the property as well. But either way, if there's a Frank's motion, if there's a valid Frank's motion as to his residence, then we should proceed today. The court. All right. Well, I have already indicated that the court is going to take under advisement the state's motion that the defense is not entitled to a hearing under Frank's challenge to the search warrant based on the allegations in the pleading. We'll hear evidence at this time on the Frank's motion portion of the motion. I'm not sure actually how far we're going to get to the other challenge of the search warrant today. So, Mr. Buting. Attorney Fallon, that's fine. The court, you may proceed, Mr. Buting. Attorney Buting, I talked with counsel about this, and I will limit my questioning of this witness. Actually, I would have some relevance to the other parts of the motion on multiple entries, but for today's purposes, I'm going to limit it to the parts of this that deal with Frank's motion and the issuance of the warrant in the first instance. I would move to sequester any other witnesses that the state intends to call. Attorney Fallon, I don't believe any of them are here, but if I can have a moment. The court, go ahead. Attorney Fallon, to canvass. Attorney Krantz, I will take care of it, Judge. Attorney Fallon, okay, good. The court, Detective, would you spell your name and state it for the record, please? The witness, sure. Mark Wiegert, Wiegert. Direct examination by Attorney Buting. And how are you employed? I'm an investigator with the Calumet County Sheriff's Department. And how long have you been there? About 14 years. And as part of your responsibilities, did you go through some training in law enforcement before you arrived? Yes. On the job? Yes. And what did that involve? I have an associate's degree in police science. I have a lot of specialized classes as far as investigations, interviews, and things like that. Okay, and I assume that part of your training involved the Fourth Amendment and how it applies to law enforcement. Yes, that would be the rights with regard to searches and seizures, right? Yes. Okay, and I assume you learned about the standard that is applied under the Fourth Amendment, that is probable cause. Yes. And you've learned about searches with warrants and searches without warrants. Yes. And you were also taught how to apply for a search warrant. Yes. And what do you do and how do you go about applying for a search warrant? Basically, getting your information together, putting together an affidavit for the search warrant, and putting the search warrant together and presenting it to a judge. And the affidavit that you put together is that something that you type up yourself? No. Is that something that you dictate to someone else, or what? Depends on the situation. Sometimes it's dictated. Sometimes it may be called in over the phone. Sometimes we may get it off a report. Depends on the situation. Are they fill in the blank kind of things? The affidavit? Generally not. Okay, so it's usually the words in it, though, come from you, prepared by some typist somewhere. Generally, yes. Not like you don't have the district attorney prepare your warrants. It's usually a member of the district attorney's office that will prepare that for us. Okay, some clerical staff. Is that what you're saying? Yes. And then you are aware that these affidavits have to be sworn, that you have to be sworn before you sign the affidavit, right? Yes. And you swear that everything in them is the truth, right, as you know it. The truth, yes. Now, in this particular case, you were working on an investigation of a complaint or concern about a missing person initially, correct? Yes. Teresa Halbach, right? Yes. And that complaint or call came into you on November 3rd, or in your department on November 3rd. Is that right? That's correct. About 5:30 p.m., something like that? Yeah, I think roughly. Okay, and you were assigned. How did you manage to get involved in the case? Initially, no. Initially, it went to the road officer who eventually contacted me for assistance in the case. Okay, and did you know the Halbach family or Teresa? No, I did not. And one of your first duties, or one of the first things you did anyway, was to go over to Teresa's residence, right? Yes. And you spoke with some of her friends and roommates who were there, right? Friends, roommates, family. Okay, and did you have opportunity to look at the list of phone calls that she had made? Yes. How did that come about? I believe one of her best friends and her roommate had located her phone records on her computer. So somebody had a password. They were able to get into her online records. I assume so, yes. And so you looked at a list of phone calls that she had made on her cell phone in particular on October 31st, right? Correct. And there was no other outgoing calls from her cell phone after that date, right? Yes. Attorney Fallon, Your Honor, I'm going to interpose an objection as to the relevance of this particular line of inquiry as it pertains to whether or not there was a lie or reckless disregard for the truth in the November 5th affidavit. It seems to be a bit of a tenuous in terms of its connection. It seems to be more of an exploratory or discovery in nature. The court, Mr. Buting. Attorney Buting, it's foundational, Judge. I'm leading up to how he developed his investigation, and in particular with volunteers. The court, well, some background might be appropriate, but I think it's getting a little more detailed than it needs to be. So I'll ask you to move it along. By Attorney Fallon. At some point, after going through this list of phone numbers, you noticed that one of them was a phone call to Bob Jonda's house, right? Yes. And somehow you determined that it was Mr. Avery, could have been to Mr. Avery to Stephen Avery. Is that right? We had learned that it was a relative of Stephen Avery, specifically his sister. Okay, so you contacted, he lived in Manitowoc County, you are Calumet, right? That's correct. So you contacted the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department and requested their assistance. Yes. And when you called, you spoke to Sergeant Colburn. Yes. And did he just answer the phone, or did he somehow get assigned to you? I called the department directly and requested to speak with the shift commander or supervisor, and I believe Sergeant Colburn called me back. Okay, so you spoke to him about some investigation you wanted to do, and then shortly after that, you got a call from Lieutenant Link. Is that right? I spoke with Sergeant Colburn first, and then, yeah, sometime after that, I believe Lieutenant Link called me back. So he called you. You didn't call him? No, I didn't call him. Okay, and you learned later, sort of passing over some things here. You learned later that Sergeant Colburn had gone out and talked to Mr. Avery, Stephen Avery, correct? Yes. And in fact, he had actually gone into his residence, looked around, and saw that no evidence of Teresa Halbach or anything amiss, correct? I don't know if initially Sergeant Colburn went into the residence. Without reviewing my report, I don't know that. I know he spoke with Stephen Avery. Okay. Next day is when Detective Remaker or somebody actually went over and went to his house. Yes, somebody eventually did. Okay. Now, at some point, then was it on the first night, November 3rd, did you learn that there was some family or friends who were interested in assisting the investigation in some way? No. No? Not on November 3rd? Okay. Did you learn that on November 4th? On November 4th, I spoke with one of Teresa's friends who was at her residence, and they indicated they were going to hang some posters. Okay, let me just back up for 1 second, to clarify the record. Actually, on November 3rd, that was the same evening you contacted Sheriff Fargo, correct? That's correct. And he took steps to see that the missing person complaint was distributed to the media, right? Yes. With the hope that would generate some public assistance in locating Teresa or her vehicle, right? Yes. And did that request that went out to the public include a description of Teresa's vehicle? Yes, it did. Do you recall what it was? It was, I believe it was a 1999 RAV4, greenish in color, and we had the license plate put on there as well. Okay, and so did you get a call from people then interested in providing assistance? Yes, we got several calls from the public. Okay, and did some of those actually include people who were interested in going out, boots on the ground, doing a search? We had gotten inquiries, I believe, the following day that people were wondering if there was a way of search organized or not. Okay, and that would be November 4th, correct? Yes. And that's also the day that you did a flyover of the Manitowoc County area. Is that right? I did not personally, but our department did. Sheriff Poggle, I think, was involved? Yes. And that included a flyover of the Avery property, correct? Yes. Were there any other flyovers done of the Avery property, by the way, or other duties or other dates that you are aware of? I believe after her vehicle was found, I think there was a flyover done then. Okay, so after you learned that there were people interested in helping search and wondering if anybody was organizing a search is the word you said, right? Correct. What did you do, or what did you suggest with regard to the request for citizens who were interested in doing that kind of search? Well, basically, they would call me. I told them at this point we would take their names, and if our department was going to organize anything, and if we were intending on using anybody, that we would call them. But at that point, we had no intention of forming any kind of search. Now, were you concerned? Have you ever done any? Let me go back for a second. Had you ever been done in any other missing person cases? Yes. Had you ever done any large-scale searches for missing persons? Yes. Were there citizens where citizens get involved and actually start doing searches themselves? The other large one that I can remember doing, we used firefighters for not just citizens. I should say not citizens at all. We used firefighters for the other one that I was involved in. Oh, okay. As an investigator, if there was a concern about being a possible crime and possible evidence, you might have some concerns about citizens just running amok, so to speak, doing their own searches freelance. Correct? If I had a specific area where I thought the crime was committed, yes, I would have that concern. Okay, and even without that, I assume if there's a large scale, it would start, it would be best that it be organized in some way so that people are not researching the same areas and, searching over the same areas. Is that right? Yeah, yes. Okay, so for the instance in a fire, the one where you use firemen, you often do something called a grid search. Yes, and that's where people kind of running or walking along a parallel, covering ground, the same ground in a almost grid-shaped patterns, right? That's correct. So at what point did you learn that some of these citizens were actually going to do searches themselves? They actually wanted to get out into the field and start walking and searching. I had received a phone call late Friday afternoon, evening area by somebody, I don't even recall who it was, that they had intended on getting a search party together to go to the Manitowoc or Mishkat area and look for her vehicle in ditches and things. They were concerned that she had had an accident. Okay, and why did they call you? I can't answer why they called me. I don't know that. Did you give them any advice or suggestions? No, I did not. They had just advised me that they were planning on doing that. And what I told them is that I would notify Manitowoc County if they're intending on searching road areas and ditches, that the searchers would be in that area, that they may want to have somebody there out for traffic control. And after hanging up with that person, I did contact the shift commander in Manitowoc County again late Friday evening and told them that there were going to be volunteer searchers in that area, looking through ditches, things like that, that they may want to have an officer in that area for traffic control, because I did not know how big it was going to be, or how small it was going to be. And this was late on, you said Friday afternoon. That's November 4th, right? Yes. And the shift commander that you spoke to was who? I don't know who was working that afternoon. Late afternoon, but before 5? I want to say it was after 5, before 8, I believe. I worked quite late that night on the case, so I'm not really sure. I believe it was between 5 and 8 sometime. Would it have been a Sergeant Colburn you spoke to earlier? I don't believe it was Sergeant Colburn. It was somebody who I had not spoke to at all on that case at that point. So it wasn't, you had spoken to Sergeant Colburn and Lieutenant Link. It was neither of those? No, it was neither of those. Detective Remaker, you also spoke with? No, it was not him either. It was one of their road shift commanders. Okay, okay. And your understanding was that the search party was going to do this on Saturday, the 5th. That's correct. Okay, and so on Saturday, did you also get some calls from any of the other citizen searchers telling you any further plans that they had? No, I did not. Did you talk with any of the searchers about trying to get together with a meeting somewhere where they could sort of coordinate their efforts? No. Did you ever suggest that perhaps the searchers could meet at the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department or somewhere nearby there and try to coordinate their efforts? No. What I did have was a discussion with the Sheriff Poggle and Investigator Dettering on Saturday morning, and we'd come up with basically a plan that we were going to go to the Sheriff's Department in Manitowoc and meet with one of the detectives there. And we thought as long as we were there, volunteers in the area, we would see if the Averys would give us permission to go to their property. And if there were volunteers willing to assist us, that we would go out there and see if we could get permission to use those volunteers for that purpose. So you had this meeting with Sheriff Poggle and Dettering, you said. That's correct. And your specific interest or area of interest at that point, though, was the Avery property. During our discussions, that's what we thought we would do. Yes. And prior to that time, had you ever asked any of the Averys permission to go into their salvage yard and search? I personally did not, no. Are you aware of anybody in your department or in Manitowoc who asked them personally? Outside of what you asked me earlier, I know that there was some officers who had, days earlier, had talked to some of the Averys, but I don't know what they asked them. Well, you are aware that they went to Mr. Avery's residence. Yes, I'm aware of that. This is in Manitowoc Sheriff's people? Correct, yes. And that he allowed them to come into his residence and look around? Yes. My question then is, do you know whether, did either you or to your knowledge, the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department ask any of the Averys, Stephen or otherwise, if they could go through the rest of the property, all the salvage vehicles, and all of that to search? I never did personally know, and I don't know if anybody from Manitowoc did. I'm not aware if they did. Okay, so the Saturday morning, you stated that you were interested then in searching the salvage yard. Yes. Why? Well, after doing the interview both Thursday night and Friday, researching Teresa's financial records, researching Teresa's phone records, knowing that one of the last places that we believe that she was on the Avery property, or at least one of the last places that she was seen, we think she was, and one of the last people she had contact with on the phone, we thought that would be a good place for us to start. And indeed, Sheriff Poggle had done a flyover of the property just the day before, correct? That's correct. And did he see anything of suspicion? No, not that I'm aware of. Not that you were aware of? Not that I'm aware of. But at least you had some idea of how massive the undertaking would be. Approximately how many vehicles do you think were there in the salvage yard? At the time, I didn't know. As a result of consequence or other search warrants that we did, I have a good idea of how many vehicles were out there, which is, I believe there were roughly 3,800 vehicles. Okay, so approaching 4,000 vehicles, and Sheriff Poggle saw that it's in totality from the air on November 4th, right? I would assume so, yes. Attorney Fallon, Your Honor, I'm going to interpose an objection on 2 grounds. Still, I'm not entirely sure that I see the relevance of all this vis-a-vis the challenge to the avertments and the warrant. And number 2, even if the court does find its relevance, I think we're going at the point where counsel is leading the witness and should be doing a direct, not a cross. The court, Mr. Buting, Attorney Buting, well, I can rephrase it so it's not leading. The court, I'm going to sustain the objection on relevance. This is not a trial, it's a motion hearing. I read your documents. I think it's time to get to the meat of your motion. By Attorney Buting. Okay, so going back to Saturday morning, November 5th, then you talked about your plan was that you would go to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department, that is you and who? Myself, Sheriff Poggle, and Investigator Dettering. And what would you try to meet with some of the citizens who were interested in searching? No, our intention was to meet with Detective Rimiker, who was working that morning for the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department. And did you tell Detective Remaker that you were interested in getting some space where the citizens could meet and organize their searches? No, my phone conversation with Detective Remaker consisted of basically telling him that we would all like to come down and meet with him. I did inform him over the phone that there were volunteer searchers in the area of the Avery property, that we would like to get permission from the Avery family. And if we gain permission, that we would like to use those volunteer searchers to go search the Avery property. Well, did he tell you did you tell Detective Remaker that you were aware of several of the searchers were willing to go into the Avery property and search the junkyard salvage area? No, I couldn't have, because I had no knowledge of that at all. I hadn't talked to any of the volunteer searchers up to that point, except for the one phone call that I received the night before, basically indicating that they were going to do that. So no, I did not tell him that. I told him we would like to meet with him and use those volunteer searchers if we had permission from the Averys to do so. So, your phone call the night before, did the individuals you spoke with, the citizens you spoke with, express any interest in searching the Avery property? No, again, their primary focus when they spoke with me is that they were concerned, as I think you get a lot of times initially in a missing persons complaint, that maybe she ran off the road somewhere, maybe she's laying in a ditch. There's a lot of deep ditches in that area. If you're familiar with that area, where that 147, for example, there's a lot of deep ditches, there's ponds, there's things like that. So, in my conversation with searchers at the time, they were more concerned about that than anything else. Well, had you had any phone conversations with any of the volunteer searchers on Saturday morning? Again, I don't believe I did. Did you tell Detective Remaker that you wanted to come meet at the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department with volunteers and coordinate your efforts with theirs? No. What I told Detective Remaker was that I would like to meet with him and that there were volunteer searchers in that area, and if we got permission from the Averys, that we would like to use those volunteer searchers. I believe I know what you're referring to, and I believe that Detective Remaker may have misunderstood me on the phone. Well, now how are you going to get any of the searchers to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department? Where would you meet and use any of their services? Wasn't our intention to bring them to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department. It was our intention to go out to the Averys first and get permission. We knew from the conversation on Friday that they were going to be in that area looking through ditches. So we knew that there would be searchers in that area. We could meet with them there. That's who we were going to do that. So your plan was you were just going to go, to go to Manitowoc Sheriff's Department at all? Because we wanted to meet with Detective Remaker and see what his thoughts were on it. It was his jurisdiction at that point. We didn't have any jurisdiction over anything at that point. So we wanted to go down, meet with him, and see what his thoughts were on it. Why didn't you just pick up the phone and call one of the Averys or go there yourself and ask the first question, which is it okay if we and perhaps some other volunteers come and search the salvage yard? Again, we were out of our jurisdiction at that point. We had not been named to lead investigative agency at that point, number one. Number two, the media had contacted us on Saturday and requested if we had any new information. And we had also instructed the media to meet us at Manitowoc Sheriff's Department. At that point, we were trying to get it out to the media as much as we could because we had a missing persons complaint. We were concerned about her. That was the other reason we went to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department, because the media was going to meet us there. Oh, so you had actually arranged to have the media meet you at Manitowoc. They were calling us constantly, obviously, and Saturday morning they were again on the phone with us, and we thought we would meet with them on Manitowoc at that point. And again, the idea was you were going to all that before you contacted Avery's and even asked if they would give you permission. We were going to do that. I'm not sure. Meet at the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department with Manitowoc people and the media. No, we were going to meet with the detectives and the media, yes. Before contacting the Averys. Yes. Okay, and did you have any reason to believe or any concern that the Averys would not give permission? Not at that point, no. And I assume at that point you didn't believe you had probable cause to get a search warrant for the Avery property. No, I did not have any probable cause at that time. So, did you ever meet with any of the volunteers on Saturday morning? No. Well, let me go back from there. After we got the call from Pam Sturm, who was a volunteer searcher, obviously we talked with her. But prior to that, no, I did not meet with any volunteer searchers. Did you do you know whether the volunteer searchers had any kind of maps that they were working with? I found out later that in talking with Mr. Hilgus, he had instructed me, or told me later basically, that he had gotten some maps and things together. At the time, I did not know that. Did the maps come from you? No. Do you know if they came from Manitowoc Sheriff's Department? And speaking with Mr. Hilligus at a later date, he had told me that he had taken them off the internet. All right, so it is your testimony that until you got your phone call from a woman by the name of Pamela Sturm while you were at the Sheriff's Department in Calumet, you had no idea whatsoever that any of the volunteers were going to be searching the Avery property. That is correct. But you don't know what Manitowoc may have known as to that. No, I don't know. Was there some effort to, in the public and the media, information that was distributed, or was there some efforts to centralize the phone number where people could call if they had found something? During our initial press conference or news release on the night, actually, that she was reported missing on the 3rd, we had given out our Sheriff's Department and our Crime Stoppers number. If anybody had any information about Teresa, we instructed them to call those numbers. And when you got a call at some point on Saturday morning from Pamela Sturm, right? Yes. And do you know what number it came in on? I believe it was our regular line. From what I understand, she had called from her cell phone. Then she called the Sheriff's Department phone number, the regular line. It is my understanding. All right. Now, that phone call, actually, part of it took place before you got on the phone. I understand. Is that right? Yes. And that was because it was originally, the call was given to Sheriff Ogle. Yes. Okay. And so then how did you become involved in it? Actually, Sheriff Poggle, myself, and Investigator Dettering were physically walking out the back door of the Sheriff's Department to go to Manitowoc when Sheriff Poggle got called back into the dispatch center. So we all went back into the dispatch center. At that time, the dispatcher informed Sheriff Poggle that there was a phone call from a lady named Pam, I believe. I think that's what she had said, something about a raft or which she believed she had found. Sheriff Poggle initially took the phone and eventually handed the phone over to me because he did not have his glasses and could not read a VIN number which he was trying to compare. So then you got on the phone and spoke to this woman. Is that correct? Yes. Now, did you know who this Pamela Sturm woman was? No. Never met her before? No. Never talked to her before? No. Okay. And Sheriff Poggle passed it to you because you had the full VIN number somewhere. No, the dispatcher had the full VIN number. Sheriff Poggle had the VIN number in his hand, which was given to him by the dispatcher, but he didn't have his glasses with him, so he couldn't read it. So he handed the phone to me and the VIN number to me. Okay, now when you talked with her, did she give you the description of the vehicle that she saw? Yes. And did she tell you that it was green? I believe she said it was greenish blue. Did she tell you that it matched the description of the vehicle that had been passed out on any of the flyer or anything? I don't know her exact words, but she said something to the effect, I think she thought it was similar to it. Okay, but she did not have the word that it matched the description, correct? I don't know the exact words she used. Without looking at the transcript, I couldn't say the exact words she used. Well, did she, in fact, express some concern about whether it was about a difference in the color? Yes. She said it was more blue than green, correct? Attorney Fallon, excuse me, Your Honor. In an effort to expedite the proceedings, we did bring in an audio tape of that phone conversation, if counsel would like to play it. It's 4 minutes in length, thereabouts, and that might speed things along. I will offer. Mr. Beauty? Attorney Beauty, I don't know, at some point we may introduce that into evidence, but what I'm getting at right now was what his knowledge and what his information was at the time that he prepared the affidavit. So I don't know that it's directly Attorney Fallon. It's his call. It's his presentation of evidence. I just thought I would offer. All right, you may continue. Attorney Beauty. Okay. So she told you that she had found this vehicle, that was a RAV4, but she didn't tell you that it matched the description of what she was looking for, right? I believe, and again, without seeing the transcript, I don't know her exact words, but it was similar. I believe she said it was similar. She just didn't know exactly. And in fact, she said that the VIN number was of Teresa Halbach's vehicle, so that she could try and compare it to the one she had found. Is that right? Yes. And did you give it to her? No, actually, I requested that she give me the VIN number so I could compare it to what I had. Is there some reason for doing it that way? I just thought it would probably be the easier way for her. No other reason at that point. No. Okay, so did she actually find the VIN number? Did you help her? Did you help assist her in locating telling her where she could locate it on the car? Yes. And did she read the numbers to you? She did. Or actually, she had a similar problem with no glasses, did she not? Yes, she did. And she had her daughter try and read some of it. Correct. Now, in fact, she was not able to, neither nor her daughter were able to actually relay to you all of the VIN numbers that were on this unknown RAV that they had located. Isn't that right? I believe that she had provided me with 10 of these characters of the 17 that are in a VIN number. Okay, so she was unable to do all 17 characters of the VIN number. Correct. VIN numbers have a full 17 numbers, correct? Correct. All right. Now, at that point, what did you tell her to do after she had given you those 10 numbers? Actually, I asked her if she had permission to be there first. Why did you ask her that? Because that was important to establish that, whether she had permission to be on the property from the Avery family. And what difference would it make if she had not? I didn't want her, first of all, for her safety. I didn't want her in a place where she shouldn't be, obviously. I thought if she was there with permission, it would probably be a little safer for her. Because if you listen to the phone call, by the tone of her voice, she seemed somewhat concerned. She even mentioned that there were other people walking around. Were you concerned about whether legally any search might have some problems if she was there without permission? Well, certainly that would be a concern as well. But at that point, again, in the phone conversation, it appeared to me that she was concerned about her safety as well. So did you tell her she could leave then and retreat to some place of safety? What I told her to do is just stay where she was, that I would be contacting someone from Manitowoc, basically get somebody over there as soon as possible, and if she had any problems, that she should dial 911. Okay, so then you called Detective Remaker? Yes. And you also set off from Calumet County Sheriff's Department to the Avery property? Yes. And you went with someone else? I rode over with Investigator Dettering, and Sheriff Poggle had followed us there. So two vehicles, right? Yes. And when you talked with the sheriff, I'm sorry, with Detective Remaker, did you talk with him after he had gotten to the property, but before you did? I don't think so, because we arrived not long after he did. I talked to him on our way there. I called him with some more information that I had. Was this communication, was this over the dispatches or over the radio or some other personal cell phones or what? It was on work cell phones. And when you say you called him to tell him that you had some additional information, what was that? From Pam Sturm had informed me that there was a new Toyota sticker on the vehicle, and I had contacted Karen Halbach to inquire if she knew if there was one. At the time, she said she didn't know, but she would find out for me. And then Karen, in fact, called me back and told me that she believed that there was one on there, and I relayed the information to Investigator Remaker. All right. So then you arrived at the property on the Avery compound. Had you ever been there before? No. How did you know where to go? Detective Remaker gave me directions. Before he arrived, after he had gotten there? Before he arrived. And how did he know where to go on the property, I mean? On the property? Yes. If I recall Pam telling me, saying that she was down at the end of the property or something to that effect. She kind of explained to me where she was. I don't know exactly how Detective Remaker found her. That I can't answer. But she kind of described a little bit of where she was on the property. Do you know whether Detective Remaker spoke with her while he was on his way? Not to my knowledge. Did you give Detective Remaker her cell phone or anything like that? I don't recall doing that. No, I don't think so. Okay, you arrived at the Avery property and you drove down to where? Well, when I arrived at the property, there was an officer at the end of Avery Road, which is a town road, and he said he believed that they were down towards the end of the property. He said, kind of go straight, just follow the gravel road down. And this was some Manitowoc officer you were talking about? I believe it was a Manitowoc road officer at the end of the road, yes. All right, so when you drove down to the property, then there was sort of a cluster of buildings, business kind of buildings, that you first come into on your left there. Is that right? Mm-hmm, yes. And then beyond that, there was a large sort of sunken area where all the salvage cars are, correct? Yes. And did you drive your vehicle down into that depressed area? We drove down into the salvage area, yes, and drove all the way towards the back southeast corner of it. Not all the way back to back. No, we drove down to pass, if you will, past the salvage yard shop, and then down to a small embankment to a clearing area where there was a car crusher. And you saw Detective Remaker's vehicle there? Yes. And you parked next to it? Yes. All right. Now, when you personally get out and go over and look at this unknown RAV4? I did not. You spoke with Detective Remaker? Yes. And did he tell you that he had gone and looked at it? Yes. And did he tell you that before he had been able to see himself that he was able to read all 17 characters of the VIN number? Yes, he did. He didn't tell you that he was unable to read the first 2 or 3 numbers? Eventually, I don't know when I learned this, but I know eventually he indicated that he had a difficulty in seeing the first several digits of the VIN number. However, he used a small flashlight. I believe he said he had gotten it from another officer, and then he was able to read the entire VIN number at that time. Now, did you know, or let me ask you this: you didn't stop at the other than with the officer at the Avery Road and the highway? Did you stop and talk with any of the Averys or anybody that looked like that they were in charge there before you drove down to the pit? Not prior to going into the pit? No. And did you have any knowledge whether Detective Remaker had received consent to be where he was at that point? I can't answer that. I don't know. Okay. Now, at some point, other personnel from Manitowoc and your department arrived. I take it. Yes. And some agreement was made because of some concern that your department would take over the lead investigation. Yes, there was a representative of the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department, as well as my sheriff, and eventually the Manitowoc District Attorney, as well as the Calumet County District Attorney. And the decision was made at some time during that. And the concern was that because Stephen Avery had a pending lawsuit, $36 million civil lawsuit against Manitowoc County, that there might be some impropriety or appearance of it with having that county and that department now investigating this case. Was that it? There was no concern on my part, but obviously there must have been some concern somewhere that there would be some appearance of impropriety, but I didn't have any concern at all. Did you see while you were at the property? I'm sorry, let's get the time down here so that we're clear for the record. What time did you arrive at the property, Avery property? I believe it was around 10 after 11 in the morning, give or take. Okay, and this was November 5th, right? Yes. And you were in charge of this investigation after that point, correct? Yes. Did you direct that members of your department should take over custody of the vehicle or anything of that sort? At that point, it was not my call. It was still the Manitowoc County's call at that point until the people that were obviously higher up than me made the decision that we were taking it over. And how much longer was that? A couple of hours or what? I would say, yeah, a couple of hours. I don't have a time on it, but it would be a couple of hours before it was determined, and actually, that's the way it went. Actually, could it have been as soon as 11:45? Again, I don't know. It was sometime after there was some discussions, obviously, that took place prior to that happening. It could have been. I really don't know. All right, but it is your testimony that even after that, you didn't have any involvement in directing who would take custody or maintain custody of the RAV4. Well, at that point, there was an officer from Manitowoc that was with the RAV4. I know eventually some of our officers, and I don't know at the time on it, but one of our officers eventually had taken over staying with the RAV until the crime lab would arrive on the scene. And you were parked about how far away from where the RAV4 was located? I would guess about 100 yards. And there's a little strip of trees kind of along that pond area where there's a brushy area. Okay, and the RAV4 was actually behind the brushy area? Yes. Between the brushy area and the berm, right? Yes. And so that brushy area was obscuring some of what you could see from your location. Some, yes. I mean, you could see the vehicle there. Did you have plain sight of it? No. At some point, was a decision made to try and get a search warrant for the property? Yes. Do you know when that was? Time-wise, no. Again, the two district attorneys had arrived on scene, and after conferring with them, we decided that it was the route we would take. Okay, and did you then participate in getting the warrant? I did. And did you actually draft the affidavit for that warrant yourself? No, it was drafted by a representative from the Calumet County DA's office. Did you call it in? I did speak with them, yes, and gave them the information. Okay, so you provided the information that was supposed to be put in the affidavit. Is that right? Myself, and with some assistance of Detective Remaker. Well, whose affidavit was it supposed to be? Yours or? It's mine. It's mine. Okay, so you were responsible for ensuring that the information in the affidavit was truthful, right? Yes. And when I know the search warrant, let me ask you this. Let's mark this. Exhibit 15 marked for identification. Okay, we're up to 15. I'm showing you Exhibit 15. Can you identify that? Yes, it's a search warrant. And just for the record, could you just indicate how many pages it is? With the affidavit or without? With the affidavit, the whole exhibit. Be 10 pages. Let me just show it to counsel. Okay, maybe just so we're clear then, can you tell us how many pages of that are the affidavit? There's 2 pages that are the search warrant, 3 pages of affidavit, including the signature page, obviously. Okay, and I'm sorry, what's the remainder? The remainder, there's 2, that's 3, that's the 5. There's would be 5 other pages, I guess. And those other are the returns, is that right? The return, and there's, yeah, a face page from a fax for the return, yes. For an amended return, actually? Yeah, right. And you obtained this at what time do you recall? Not offhand, I don't recall what time we obtained it. It's endorsed by me at 3:10 p.m. Okay, so around about 3 you signed it and then obtained the signature from Judge Fox, was it? Yes. The court. All right, counsel, I think since we're going to take a break sometime this afternoon, I don't think you're going to get through with him in the next few minutes. So we'll take an afternoon break at this time. Resume in 10 minutes. Attorney Beauty, thank you. Recess taken. The court. At this time, we're back on the record. I will indicate that I spoke with counsel during the break, and it's obvious we're not going to be able to complete the hearing today on the Franks motion. It's my understanding that the attorneys for both sides have gathered in the courtroom. The witnesses have been sequestered earlier who will be testifying regarding this motion. Is that correct, counsel? Attorney Fallon. We have made an effort to do that. I believe there might have been one civilian witness excused already. Attorney Beauty. Is Detective Remiker here? Officer. He is on the way. Attorney Fallon. So we have one witness that Attorney Beauty, 3 actually. He is with Link and Colburn. Attorney Fallon. We're waiting for 3 Manitowoc. The court. All right. And for the rest of today's proceedings, I believe, Mr. Beauty, you believe you can finish your direct examination of Mr. Wiegert, and you're going to take a couple of civilian witnesses? Attorney Beauty. Yes, Patricia, should be Pamela, and Nicole Stern. And other witnesses we could release if the court can give some sequestration instructions. But since some of them aren't here, I don't know if you want to do it twice or wait a few minutes until we're concluded with him and hope that the others arrive. Did somebody call for them? They did. The court. All right. And Mr. Fallon, you're going to... Attorney Fallon. Yes. The court. Postpone your cross-examination of this witness. Attorney Fallon. Yes, in an effort to accommodate Pamela Stern and her daughter Nicole, and that I would defer cross of this witness until the 9th. In an effort, since they both took the entire day off, they have been patiently waiting. We will make an effort to get them in by the close of business today, so that they could be excused. The court. All right. We still don't have some witnesses here, correct? Officer, they're on their way. The court. From where? Officer. Sorry, the district attorney's office. The court. That's not that far away. I hope they get down here quicker than we get DAs when we need them. Call up and make sure they are on their way. The clerk. Who am I calling? The court. The DA's office. Oh, here we go. Here we go. All right. Do we have all of... We don't. Who are we missing? Officer. Colburn and Link. The court. Do we know where they are? Officer. Here they are. They are both here. The court. Okay. It's my understanding that we now have in the courtroom all of the witnesses who were subpoenaed to appear at the hearing today on the defendant's motion regarding the search warrants in this case. Because we're not going to complete today taking testimony, we're going to excuse a number of you. And I believe that is everyone, counsel, except for who? Attorney Fallon, I believe Earl Avery was subpoenaed and he was released earlier in the day. The court, okay. Attorney Buting, who was that? Attorney Fallon, Earl Avery. Attorney Buting, okay. The court, the two Sturm witnesses then. Attorney Buting, Sturm, yes. The court, we're going to take their testimony? Attorney Buting, correct. The court, they will be asked to leave the courtroom in a few minutes, but we'll get to their testimony in. The rest of you will not have to come back until August 9th. But I want to, because of the hearing has started, I want to make sure that you understand that the exclusion order continues to apply to you. That means you should not talk to any of the other witnesses in this case who have been called or who will be called. You are permitted to talk to counsel between now and the next hearing. However, in order to make sure that the exclusion order has effect, you are not to watch any newscast concerning these proceedings this evening, nor look at any webcast of today's proceedings between now and the next scheduled hearing on August 9th. And you should not discuss this case either with any of the other witnesses who have been subpoenaed or with anyone else except for counsel in this case. Counsel, are there any other admonitions either of you wishes the court to give at this time? Attorney Fallon, I guess I would add the written print account of today's testimony of this witness and the two civilians yet to come. The court, that's correct. No news accounts of any kind. Make sure that you don't read any account of today's proceedings until after you testify at the conclusion of this hearing. Anything else? Attorney Buting, Judge, just that the witnesses should be instructed that they should return on the 9th so we don't have to resubpoena them, and maybe warn some of them that it may possibly extend into August 10th as well. The court, I hope it doesn't extend into the August 10th, at least on this particular motion hearing, because we will start at 9, but that's correct. For those of you who are here under subpoena, you should report back at 9 on August 9th for the continuation of today's hearings. Mr. Fallon? Attorney Fallon, yes, I just asked that any of the witnesses who are going to have a problem with appearing on the 9th, if they would immediately let counsel or counsel staff know that there's a conflict. We'll see if we can work around that. The court, all right, very well. Then the witnesses who were subpoenaed today can step out into the hall. Except for the Sturms, the rest of you are free to leave today. And after we complete the examination of this witness, we'll assume the defense will be calling the Sturms. All right, Mr. Wiegert is still on the stand. Mr. Buting, you may resume your direct examination. Attorney Buting, thank you, Judge. By Attorney Buting, we were talking about the search warrant affidavit that you filed on November 5th around 3:10 p.m. I think it was, and you indicated that you didn't type it yourself, but you did receive a typed copy at some point, correct? Yes. And you reviewed it? Yes. And did you read it carefully? I believe so at the time. Yes. And you swore an oath that what was in that affidavit was the truth, as you knew it. Yes. In fact, though, there are a few items that are not entirely accurate in it. Are they not? There is one item that I can see from reviewing it now that is not 100% accurate. Yes. And which item is that? If you look at the affidavit, I have to find it here, paragraph 5 of the affidavit. All right, and what specific item are you referring to within the paragraph 5 that's not correct? It indicates that the search warrant provided the VIN number and lists the VIN number taken from the vehicle, which they located. In the affidavit, it has got the full VIN number, and I did not receive the full VIN number from the volunteer searchers. And you also indicated on the second line that the volunteer searchers said they had located a vehicle that matched the description of Teresa Hallbox? Yes. Did they tell you that it matched? I think we have been through this, but just so it's clear, they did not. In fact, they tell you that it matched uh, the description. They told you that it was similar to, right? Attorney Fallon, objection, argumentative, as to the context. The court, Mr. Fallon, can you explain your objection a little more? Attorney Fallon, it seems to me that maybe it's premature depending on what the next question is, but in terms of a question of semantics or matched or matching or similar to, whatever the case may be, it seems, given the tone of the voice and the manner in which the question was asked, it seemed argumentative. But it's been a long day. The court, well, just a second. Let me look at Mr. Buting, what is your question? Attorney Buting, I don't know if it is possible to read it back. Madam Reporter? Last question read back. The court, I think the objection goes more to the weight of the evidence and the inferences to be drawn from it. I will allow the question. By Attorney Buting, could you answer it? Again, I believe they had told me that it was similar. All right. And you also said that Investigator Remaker was able to confirm the VIN number, and then you list all 17 characters again of the VIN number. That's not accurate, isn't that right? No, that's accurate. By the time of this preparation of the warrant, you were saying that Detective Remaker had been able to do that. Yes, he did. Okay, and Detective or Investigator Remaker actually assigned in the preparation of this warrant? Yes. This affidavit? Yes. Attorney Buting, I will pass. The court, that's the end of your questions? Attorney Buting, that's the end of my questions, Your Honor. The court, Mr. Fallon, I understand you are going to postpone your cross until the 9th. Attorney Fallon, yes, I will defer cross until the 9th in an effort to get the terms done. The court, very well. This witness is excused. The witness, thank you, Your Honor.